Did you hear what happened earlier?
Yes, I can't believe he's actually apologizing.
She handled it so well.
The soft clink of silverware hitting plates echoed through the upscale restaurant, the chatter of well-dressed patrons weaving a quiet hum in the background. Waitresses glided between tables, balancing trays with practiced ease. At one corner, under a dim chandelier, Maya Simmons paused, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of her serving tray. A chill swept over her, settling low in her stomach. The guest at table 16, Charles Price, the billionaire tech mogul known for his sleek suits and even sharper tongue, was glaring at her. His ice-blue eyes, cold as steel, drilled into her with a predatory sharpness that sent a tremor through her spine. Maya wasn't just another server here. She knew the looks, the whispers, how they saw her. But tonight, something was different. As she approached, he didn't wait for her to speak. His gaze never left her face as he slowly stood, towering over her. The silence stretched between them, suffocating. His voice cut through it, smooth but laced with disdain. "What are you even doing here?" Maya's heart skipped a beat, her throat dry. The air in the restaurant seemed to thicken, each breath harder to take. Then, without warning, in front of a room full of eyes, Charles Price bent his knee, bowing dramatically as if she were royalty. The room went silent. She stood frozen, 1,000 emotions running through her. Confusion, anger, humiliation. "Is this what you want?" he asked, his words sharp enough to cut. Maya couldn't answer. The weight of his actions hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, leaving a bitter taste in her mouth. The following day, the weight of what happened at the restaurant still hung over Maya like a storm cloud. She walked to the back door of La Maison Luxe, the familiar smells of garlic and butter mixing with the sharp scent of coffee in the air. The sounds of clinking dishes and soft chatter from front of the house seemed distant, muffled by the rush of blood in her ears. She kept her head down as she punched in her time card, barely acknowledging the shift supervisor, Carl, who gave her a casual nod. "You're on Section 3 tonight," Carl called out, but Maya barely heard him. The whispers began almost immediately. From the moment she entered the break room, the murmur of hushed voices followed her, like shadows trailing her every move. A few of her co-workers, mostly servers who had witnessed the scene, cast quick, uncomfortable glances in her direction. Some stared at the floor, others avoided eye contact altogether, pretending to focus on their phones or paperwork. Maya could feel their eyes on her. She had known it would happen. People always talk when something like this occurred, but she hadn't expected it to feel so isolating. Tamara, a friend from the kitchen, leaned against the break room doorway, her arms crossed tightly. Her face was scrunched in concern. "Hey, you all right?" she asked, her voice low. Maya didn't answer right away. Instead, she slid her fingers over the smooth surface of the counter, clenching her fists around the edge. The humiliation from last night hadn't faded. It was still raw, still stinging, lodged deep in her chest. "They're talking about me," Maya finally muttered, glancing up at Tamara. They all saw it. They saw him do it, and no one did anything. Tamara's expression softened. "People are scared, Maya. You know that. He's a billionaire. People don't want to lose their jobs over something like this." She paused, clearly choosing her words carefully. "But that doesn't make it right." "I can't just pretend it didn't happen," Maya said, shaking her head. "I can't stand this. Standing here every day, knowing people saw me humiliated and said nothing. It's like it's all normal, but it isn't." Tamara stepped closer, her voice firm with resolve. "You can't just let him win, Maya. If you walk away now, it'll be like you're saying it's okay. You're stronger than this. You got to fight back." Maya felt the knot in her stomach tighten. What could she possibly do? A server in a fancy restaurant, with no power, no platform, against a man with billions at his disposal? It seemed impossible. She couldn't just quit. She needed this job. She needed to survive. The manager, Alan, walked in at that moment, his face drawn tight in what appeared to be forced professionalism. "Maya," he said, his tone stiff, "can I have a word?" Maya felt a jolt of unease run through her. Alan was usually friendly, but today, something about his posture, his rigid stance, and the way his eyes kept darting around, fell off. "Sure," she said, following him into his office. Once the door was closed, Alan's expression shifted. He didn't look her in the eye as he spoke, and his voice was quieter now. "Look, Maya, last night, it was a tricky situation." He shuffled some papers on his desk, then glanced at her briefly. "We all saw what happened with Mr. Price. And, well, he made it clear he wasn't happy with the service." Maya narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I did my job." "Right, of course," Alan said quickly, holding up his hands in defense. "But you know how it is with clients like him. He's a regular here, and he's got pull. The last thing we want is to upset someone like him. Are you telling me it was my fault?" Maya asked, her voice trembling with anger, but she kept it low. She could already feel the familiar burn of injustice rising inside her. No, Alan said quickly. "It's just, I need you to understand that. Maybe next time you can handle situations like this differently." Maya stood frozen, her mind racing. He wasn't reprimanding her. He was telling her to bow down to a man who had just publicly humiliated her. He was asking her to accept it, to allow the system of wealth and power to steamroll her. She felt a sharp pang in her chest, like a slap, invisible and undeniable. "I can't do that," Maya whispered, the weight of the words hitting her like a wave. "I won't. Not again." Alan didn't seem surprised by her response, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "You have to think about your future here," he said softly. This could be the end of your career if this escalates." Maya stood there, her mind swirling with anger and hurt. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all the invisible people, the ones who'd been pushed down time and time again, who had never been given a chance to speak. When she finally left his office, the realization settled on her. She wasn't going to let this go. She didn't know how or where to start, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't just walk away and pretend it never happened. Not this time. Maya Simmons felt the weight of the tray press into her palms as she approached table 16. The gleaming white plates gleamed in the soft, golden glow of the chandelier, their edges catching the light like delicate shards of porcelain. The hum of quiet conversation filled the air around her, punctuated by the soft clink of silverware. It was just another night at La Maison Luxe, the upscale restaurant that catered to the city's wealthiest and most powerful. Maya had learned long ago to navigate the unspoken dynamics, to smile through the discomfort of being one of the few black faces in a sea of privilege. But tonight, the tension felt different. The man sitting at table 16, Charles Price, was the wealthiest of them all. He had built a fortune in tech, his name synonymous with innovation, power, and cold ambition. Maya had served him before, but tonight, something about his gaze unsettled her. His icy blue eyes followed her every movement as she neared. She could feel his gaze like a weight pressing against her chest, heavy and unforgiving. When she reached the table, she made the mistake of meeting his eyes. For a brief moment, he seemed to study her, as if deciding whether she was worthy of his attention. And then he spoke. "What are you even doing here?" The words were low, but sharp, slicing through the soft murmur of the restaurant. Maya blinked, caught off guard. She could feel every eye in the room shift toward her, the space between them growing suffocating. The other patrons at nearby tables fell silent, watching the encounter unfold with the eager curiosity of a spectator sport. She swallowed hard, her voice faltering. "Excuse me, sir." He didn't even bother to acknowledge her question. Instead, he stood, slowly, deliberately, towering over her like a predator. "Let's be honest. You don't belong here," he said, his voice oozing with condescension. "You're just a waitress." The word stung, but it wasn't just the insult. It was the sheer arrogance, the disdain in his voice. It was as if she was invisible, nothing more than an obstacle in his way. And then, without warning, he did something that shocked her to the core. He dropped to one knee, bowing low in front of her. The action was slow, deliberate, meant to humiliate her in front of the entire restaurant. The room was dead silent now, everyone frozen in disbelief. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled slightly as she steadied the tray, unsure whether to speak or move. "Is this what you want?" he asked, his words dripping with sarcasm. She stood frozen, the weight of his gesture hanging in the air like a thick fog. Every inch of her body screamed to run, to walk away, to pretend it hadn't happened. But she couldn't. She couldn't let him win like that. But as she opened her mouth to respond, the words caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to fight this. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. He stood, a smug smile playing on his lips, and went back to his seat as if nothing had happened. Maya's hands were still shaking. Her mind was racing. The restaurant resumed its quiet murmur, but Maya couldn't focus on the chatter, the clinking of glasses, or the soft music playing overhead. All she could think of was the weight of his bow, the humiliation that had just unfolded, and a question that lingered in her mind. Why did the billionaire bow to a black waitress mid-restaurant? Maya couldn't shake the weight of the encounter from the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Charles Price's smug face, his deliberate bow, and the way it felt like the entire restaurant watched her crumble beneath his gaze. But now, as she sat in her small, dimly lit apartment, a flicker of determination replaced the anger that had previously overwhelmed her. She wasn't going to let this slide. She pulled up the browser window on her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she hesitated for a moment. What exactly was she looking for? What could she find about a man who seemed so untouchable? But Maya knew that the truth was out there somewhere beyond the polished headlines and glossy media portraits that painted Price as a philanthropist and visionary. Her first step was simple enough. Google. The search bar blinked at her, waiting for the query. Charles Price racism. The return was immediate. Dozens of articles about his business empire, interviews, his tech innovations. But as she sifted through the results, nothing stood out. The corporate gloss was thick. Everyone seemed to praise him, to tout his disruptive ideas, his genius. Then she stumbled upon a single blog post, buried deep within the archives of a site that didn't seem to care for reputation. It was an old article, published 5 years ago, and it was titled "Billionaire CEO Faces Lawsuit for Racial Discrimination in Employee Training Programs." Maya clicked on the link, almost without thinking, her heart racing. The article was brief, but it was enough. Price's company, Apex Technologies, had been accused of systematic racial discrimination. Maya skimmed the text, her blood running cold as she read about the lawsuit filed by former employees. The suit alleged that Price's company had implemented biased hiring and training practices, systematically offering lower-level positions to Black and Latino employees, while their white colleagues were promoted and given better opportunities for career growth. There was a mention of a colorblind diversity training program, but the article made it clear that the program itself had done little to address the core issue, racism within the company's culture. Price's company has long avoided public scrutiny, the article ended, thanks to their legal team's aggressive tactics. But with enough pressure, the truth could come to light. Maya stared at the screen, the weight of the words pressing down on her. The lawsuit had never gone to trial, and the accusations had been swept under the rug, perhaps because of Price's wealth and influence. But now, the pieces started to come together. The same man who had humiliated her last night had a history of exploiting people who looked like her, and the system that allowed him to continue doing it was powerful, deliberate, and insidious. Her phone buzzed on the table, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Tamara. "Tamara, have you seen the news? There's a protest happening outside Apex's office tomorrow. I know you're pissed, but this could be our chance to do something. What do you think?" Maya's mind raced. A protest? She wasn't the type to take to the streets. She wasn't the type to be seen, at least not like this. She had always avoided drawing attention to herself. But now, after everything she had read, after everything she had experienced, it felt like fate knocking on her door. This wasn't just about her. It was about the years of exploitation and silence. She typed back, her fingers shaking as she hit send. "Maya, I'm in." The next day, after work, Maya met Tamara at a small cafe downtown. Tamara was already there, sitting in a booth near the window, scrolling through her phone. Her eyes lit up when Maya walked in. "I'm glad you came," Tamara said, setting her phone down. "I knew you'd be ready to do something, even if you didn't know it yet." Maya smiled weakly, taking a seat across from her. "I don't know what to expect from this, but I can't stand by and let him get away with it. I've spent too many years being invisible." "You're not invisible anymore," Tamara replied, her voice firm. "This is just the beginning, Maya." Maya nodded, a flicker of resolve hardening within her chest. For so long, she had been a passive observer, accepting the crumbs that were thrown her way. But now, after learning about Price's history, after seeing the way the system treated people like her, she couldn't pretend any longer. She wasn't invisible anymore. "Have you found anything else?" Tamara asked, leaning forward. Maya hesitated for a moment before pulling out her phone. She showed Tamara the article about the lawsuit, her fingers tapping nervously along the edge of the screen. "This is what I found. His company's been getting away with it for years. This is bigger than just what happened to me." Tamara scrolled through the article, her eyes narrowing. "This is huge. If we can get this out there, it could be the catalyst for everything. People need to know who Charles Price really is." Maya stared at the screen, her heart pounding. "I think I need to go deeper. Find more people, find more proof. This is just the beginning." Tamara nodded, her expression fierce. "I'm with you. Let's take him down." Maya felt a surge of adrenaline course through her. She wasn't going to stop until Charles Price's empire crumbled, until everyone knew the truth about the man who had bent the knee to her in front of the whole restaurant, just to prove that he could. As Maya and Tamara brainstormed how to gather more evidence and reach out to former employees of Apex Technologies, Maya's mind kept returning to one thought. This is bigger than me. I have to make him pay for all the people he's hurt, all the lives he's destroyed with his cruelty. The path ahead was uncertain, and the risks were immense. But Maya knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't be silenced any longer. Not now. Not ever again. Maya spent the next few days gathering her thoughts, researching, and piecing together fragments of information. Each night, she found herself staying up late, combing through forums, legal documents, and old news articles about Charles Price and Apex Technologies. She had learned that the company's board of directors was full of influential, high-profile individuals, people who were also responsible for culture of silence that had protected Price for years. But the deeper she dug, the more it became apparent that these figures weren't going to help her. She needed someone on the inside, someone who had seen Price's cruelty up close, someone who understood the workings of his empire. And after days of searching, she found a name, Jason Hernandez. Jason had worked at Apex Technology for 5 years, leaving shortly after the first allegations of racial discrimination had surfaced. He'd been one of the employees who had filed complaints, only to watch as the legal teams buried the case, silencing anyone who dared speak out. According to his online resume, he was now working as a freelance tech consultant, but Maya knew she had to reach out to him. Her first attempt was tentative. She sent him a direct message through LinkedIn, unsure if he'd even read it, let alone respond. But within a few hours, she received a reply. "Jason Hernandez, I know what you're trying to do, and I respect it, but be careful. The higher you climb, the harder they try to push you down. I can meet you in person if you're serious about this." Maya's heart raced. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that Jason was willing to help, or at least listen. She immediately agreed to meet, setting up a coffee shop rendezvous the following day. When Maya arrived, Jason was already seated at a corner table, his face partially obscured by the brim of his baseball cap. He looked like someone trying to blend into the background, and Maya immediately understood why. He was quiet, unassuming, and yet his presence felt like someone who had seen too much to remain silent. "Are you Maya?" Jason asked, looking up as she approached. "Yeah," she said, sitting down across from him. "Are you Jason?" He nodded, taking off his cap and setting it on the table. His hair was short and dark, and his eyes were filled with a mixture of caution and resolve. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. I never thought anyone would be brave enough to take on Price." "I'm not just doing this for me," Maya said, her voice firm. "I'm doing this for everyone who's been silenced." He's destroyed so many people's lives, and no one has done anything. But it's time someone did. Jason looked at her, studying her face carefully. I get it. Believe me, I saw it happen firsthand. I watched how Price manipulated people, how he destroyed careers. I even lost my job because I stood up to him. I couldn't keep working for a company like that. I tried to speak up, but the legal team shut me down. They made sure my voice didn't matter. Maya leaned forward, her pulse quickening. What about the lawsuit? The one that never went to trial? Do you know anything about it? Jason's face darkened. He leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, clearly reluctant to dive back into the past. I know a lot about it. The thing is, it wasn't just about racial discrimination. It was about the culture Price created, where if you weren't white and in his inner circle, you were expendable. He'd play favorites, give raises to people who didn't deserve them, and punish those who challenged him. That lawsuit should have gone public, but Price used his power to bury it. No one wanted to risk their career by taking him on. Maya's frustration grew. She could feel the fire burning inside her, the injustice of it all. How many lives have been ruined by this man? How many people have been crushed under the weight of his privilege and power? I can't just let it go, Maya said, her voice low but resolute. I need to know everything. What you saw, what you experienced. The world needs to know what kind of man he really is. Jason hesitated. Maya could see the internal struggle written across his face. He wasn't sure if he was ready to go public again. The last time he had tried, it had cost him everything, his job, his reputation. Finally, he sighed, rubbing his face. All right, look, I don't know how much I can help, but I can give you some of the internal documents I saved when I left. They're not perfect, but they should be enough to show people how Price operates. I have emails, memos, stuff that paints a picture of his culture. I'll send it to you, but you need to be careful. Price's eyes everywhere, and he doesn't take kindly to people who cross him. Maya's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and anger. This was the break she needed. But at the same time, the weight of the responsibility hit her. Exposing Price meant risking her life, her safety, her future, everything. I'll be careful, she promised. But thank you, Jason. This is going to make a difference. Jason nodded, his expression softening slightly. I hope so. But you need to understand, Maya, even with this evidence, we're still fighting an uphill battle. Price has deep pockets, and he's got a whole system working for him. But if enough people speak out, if we can make this a bigger story, maybe we can bring him down. Maya looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She knew this wasn't just about one person standing up. It was about a movement, and that movement had to start with her. Thank you, she repeated. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about everyone he's hurt, everyone he stepped on to get to where he is. It's time we hold him accountable. Jason nodded, his face hardening. Good luck, Maya, and be careful. As Maya left the coffee shop, her mind was buzzing with possibilities. She had the documents now, actual evidence of Charles Price's toxic empire. The pieces were falling into place. But as she walked out into the street, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real fight was only just beginning. Maya had always known that the path to justice would be steep, but now, with Jason's documents in her hands, it felt like the mountain had become insurmountable. Still, the raw, tangible evidence he'd given her, emails, memos, and internal reports, was proof that Charles Price's empire was built on a foundation of exploitation and deception. This wasn't just about one man's arrogance.
Ms. Johnson. You
It was
have my
about a system that
sincerest
protected
apology.
him,
Your apology
allowed
is
him to
noted,
destroy
Mr. Price.
lives without
We'll be in
consequence.
touch.
But she wasn't naive. The system wasn't going to crumble just because she had a few files. No, she needed to amplify the story to make sure that Price couldn't sweep it under the rug as easily as he'd done before. She needed the media. The thought made her stomach churn. Maya wasn't a journalist. She didn't have any experience with press releases or public relations. She had never even spoken to a reporter before. But desperate times call for desperate measures. And as far as she was concerned, getting the word out about Price's abuses was the most urgent task on her list. Tomorrow was the first person she called. Hey, you still down to help? Maya asked, her voice tight with a mix of anticipation and fear. Of course, Tamar replied, her tone enthusiastic but grounded. You got the proof now. It's time to make some noise. Maya didn't hesitate. I need to get these documents to a reporter, someone who will actually take them seriously. Do you know anyone? Tamar's response was immediate. I've got a friend who works at the Tribune. I'll reach out to her. She's no stranger to controversial stories. But listen, we need to be careful. We need to have our story lined up. If we just send the documents without context, they'll dismiss it. We need to make sure it's framed the right way. Maya's mind raced. She thought of this too, of course. The idea of leaking the information was risky. One wrong move, and it could all backfire. But the urgency of the situation didn't leave her much room to hesitate. Over the next few days, she and Tamara worked in tandem. Tamara contacted her journalist friend, a reporter named Lily Carter, who was known for taking on powerful corporations. Maya had no idea if Lily would even look at the documents, but she knew that the risk of doing nothing was far worse than the risk of failure. Lily agreed to meet with them, and they set up a meeting at a small cafe on the edge of the city. Maya sat across from Tamara, her hands trembling slightly as they waited for Lily to arrive. The weight of the situation felt suffocating, as though they were all standing on the edge of something huge and dangerous. Maya couldn't help but feel that the walls were closing in. What if this didn't work? What if it was all for nothing? Then Lily walked in. She was taller than Maya expected, with dark hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, wearing a casual blazer and jeans. There was an energy about her, a quiet confidence that Maya recognized instantly as the kind of person who wouldn't be intimidated easily. Lily's eyes scanned the room, locking onto Maya and Tamara. Maya stood up, forcing herself to smile. Lily, thank you for meeting with us. No problem, Lily said, sliding into the seat across from them. She didn't waste any time. Let's get to it. What's this about? Maya took a deep breath. She was used to the hustle and bustle of the restaurant, the clattering of dishes, the low hum of background chatter. But here, now, in this small cafe, the silence fell heavy. She pulled out her laptop, opened a folder with Jason's documents, and began explaining the situation. I've got evidence of a systemic issue at Charles Price's company, Apex Technologies. He's been running a racially biased operation for years. It's not just about bad decisions. It's about a culture of exploitation. He's systematically denying opportunities to people of color, even going so far as to punish anyone who speaks out against him. Lily didn't interrupt as Maya spoke. She just listened, her eyes narrowing in thought. When Maya finished, Lily glanced down at the laptop, her gaze scanning the documents. This is pretty solid, Lily said after a long silence. You've got emails, memos, even training documents. This is what I need to take this to the next level. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of the moment. It wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was the beginning of something real. But Lily continued, this isn't going to be easy. Price is a very powerful man. He's got connections everywhere, and I know from experience that a lot of people are going to be afraid to speak out. You're not going to get a quick, easy victory. This is going to take time, and you have to be prepared for the backlash. I'm ready, Maya said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. I've spent my whole life letting people like him walk all over me. I'm not going to let him get away with this. Not now, not anymore. Lily looked at her for a moment, as if weighing Maya's resolve. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right, let's do this. But we need to make sure the story is airtight. We'll run a full investigation. We'll speak to former employees, dig into everything. And when we're ready, we'll break the story. It's going to be big. Maya nodded, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was it. This was her chance to expose Charles Price for what he truly was. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be quick. But it was the only way. As the meeting wrapped up, Lily leaned in, her voice soft but firm. This is the kind of story that changes things, Maya. If we do this right, it could be the end of Price's reign. But you need to know it's going to be messy. There will be consequences. Maya took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. I'm ready. Let's bring him down. The next few weeks were a blur of phone calls, interviews, and long nights spent poring over documents. Maya spoke to several former employees who had worked at Apex, each of them sharing their stories of discrimination, fear, and retaliation. Some were hesitant to come forward, afraid of what Price's legal team might do. But with each person who agreed to speak out, the weight of the story grew heavier. And then one evening, after a week of tense waiting, Lily called Maya. "It's time," Lily said, her voice steady. "We're going live." Maya had always thought that once the truth was out, everything would change. She imagined that Charles Price, the arrogant billionaire who had humiliated her, would be exposed to the fraud he truly was. The media would pick up on it. The public would rally, and Price's empire would crumble under the weight of his own greed and corruption. But in reality, things were never as clean, as simple, or as satisfying as she had imagined. The day after Lily's team broke the story, the media storm hit like a tidal wave. The Tribune's expose on Apex Technologies went viral almost instantly. Headlines screamed about Price's racial discrimination practices, his exploitation of workers of color, and the toxic culture he had fostered for years. It was everything Maya had hoped for and more, an avalanche of attention, phone calls, interviews, and social media posts. But what Maya didn't anticipate was how quickly things turned from excitement to exhaustion. The backlash came fast. Price's legal team moved swiftly to shut down any media outlets that tried to follow up with deeper investigations. Lawsuits began to pile up against the Tribune for defamation, though they were ultimately dismissed for lack of evidence. But even so, the threats and pressure were relentless. Maya's inbox was flooded with anonymous messages, some supportive, but many more hateful and violent. The weight of knowing she was being watched, tracked, and targeted by the very forces she was trying to expose began to wear on her. Apex Technologies launched a counteroffensive. They announced their own internal investigation, claiming that they were taking the allegations seriously, and that Price himself was deeply shocked by the accusations. Corporate-sponsored PR firms flooded social media with slick, polished statements designed to rebuild Price's image. The billionaire's carefully crafted reputation as a visionary and philanthropist was under attack, but his resources were vast, and had always known how to manipulate public perception. By the end of the week, the initial wave of media coverage had started to slow. The public's attention wavered, especially as new scandals and distractions filled the news cycle. Price's empire remained standing, untouched by the storm of controversy. And then the unthinkable happened. Maya's phone buzzed as she sat in her tiny apartment, scrolling through the latest updates. It was a text from Tamara, a message that made her heart stop. "Tamara, they're blaming you. Alan said management is going to claim you're responsible for the leak. You're going to be fired, Maya." Maya's breath hitched. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her mind struggling to comprehend the words. Fired? She had known that Charles Price had power, but she hadn't considered that it would reach this far. They were going to punish her for exposing him, for daring to make him accountable. Her fingers shook as she dialed Tamara's number. The phone rang twice before Tamara picked up, her voice calm but tinged with concern. "Tamara, what's happening?" Maya demanded, her voice tight. "They're covering their tracks, Maya. Alan just told me that the restaurant's management is distancing itself from you. They don't want to be caught up in this mess, so they're going to make you the scapegoat. They're going to claim you're the one who leaked the story to the press. They're going to say you went rogue, that you used your position as a waitress to sabotage the company." Maya felt her head spin. Everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for, was now being turned on its head. She had been silenced at work, humiliated by a powerful man, and now the very company that had ignored her cries for help was going to throw her under the bus. "Is there anything I can do?" Maya asked, her voice small, though she was fighting back tears. "What if they fire me, Tamara? What if they sue me for defamation?" "They can't sue you for something they already know is true," Tamara said quickly. "But I don't know how far they'll go. They have the money to make your life miserable, Maya. The question is, do you want to let them?" Maya sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of her emotions pressing down on her. Her body felt like it was made of lead, too heavy to move, too tired to fight. Everything had seemed so clear when she was working with Lily and gathering the evidence. This had to be the turning point. But now, standing at the edge of this precipice, she couldn't help but feel like the entire world was trying to crush her. Maybe I should just walk away, Maya whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Maybe I should let it go. I'm just one person. What's the point if I'm going to lose everything? No, Tamara said, her voice strong and resolute. You can't let them win, Maya. You've come too far. You've already started something bigger than you. If you walk away now, if you give up, they'll just keep doing the same thing. But if you fight, you'll show everyone that they can't silence you. You'll show them that you won't be erased. Maya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The doubt still lingered in her chest. But Tamara's words cut to the fog of fear. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had been silenced, everyone who had been crushed by the weight of a system that had never cared about them. Okay, Maya said, her voice stronger now. Okay, I'm not backing down. They won't silence me. Tamara's voice softened. Good, because we're not done yet. We're to keep fighting. I'm with you, Maya. Always. Maya hung up the phone, her heart still heavy but a spark of resolve lighting within her. She wasn't going to let them make her disappear. She had exposed the truth, and she wasn't going to let the world forget it. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The air was thick with tension as Maya walked into the upscale office building where Charles Price's company, Apex Technologies, had its headquarters. Despite the sleek glass exterior and polished marble floors, everything about this place felt foreign to her. This was the very empire she had fought against, the system of privilege, greed, and exploitation that allowed men like Price to thrive while destroying people like her. Maya was nervous, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had already been humiliated, fired, and threatened. What more could they do to her? What more could she lose? Are you sure you want to go through with this? Tamara's voice echoed in her head, reminding her of their conversation earlier that day. Yeah, Maya had said then, steeling herself. I've come this far. If I don't confront him now, I'll never be able to live with myself. Now, as she stood outside Price's office, she couldn't help but feel a wave of dread crash over her. It was one thing to expose someone in the media. It was another thing entirely to confront them face to face. But Maya knew this was the only way to end it. She had the evidence. She had the truth, and she was done being passive. She couldn't be a silent victim anymore. She knocked on the door, the sound echoing louder than she anticipated. There was no turning back now. Come in. A deep voice called from the other side. She pushed the door open. The office was everything she expected. Sleek, minimalist, with a view of the city skyline stretching out in front of her. But what stood out most was Charles Price himself, sitting behind a large, imposing desk, looking every bit the part of the untouchable billionaire. His sharp, tailored suit was almost as cold as his steely blue eyes. He didn't stand when she entered, didn't even acknowledge her as she stepped into the room. His eyes flicked up to her, cold and calculating, as though she were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Maya, he said, his tone smooth but dripping with condescension. I see you made it all the way here. What can I do for you today? Her fists clenched at her sides. The same man who had humiliated her in front of an entire restaurant, who had built his fortune on the backs of people like her, was now pretending as if she were the problem. It was almost too much to bear. I'm not here for pleasantries, Charles, she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. I'm here because of the damage you've done to me and to everyone who's worked under you. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of his mouth. Damage? He repeated, his voice a low chuckle. You really think you're the one who's been wronged here? You think you're the only one who's ever had to make sacrifices to get ahead? Maya stood tall, refusing to let him belittle her. I've seen the emails, Charles. I've seen how you've systematically discriminated against people of color at Apex. How you've turned a blind eye to the abuse and mistreatment of your employees. You've spent years building your empire on the suffering of others, and now it's time for you to face the consequences. Price's face hardened. For a moment, he said nothing. His eyes, which had once been filled with arrogance, now looked almost uncertain. But only for a moment. He recovered quickly, his posture straightening as he leaned forward on his desk. Is that so? He said, his voice low and dangerous. And what do you think you're going to do about it, Maya? You really think the media will make any difference? You really think you can take me down with some petty accusations and a few documents? I already have. Maya shot back, her anger rising. The truth is out there now. People are listening. They're seeing what you've done, and they're not going to just forget it. Not this time. Price's jaw clenched, and for a moment, Maya thought he might finally crack, might show the fear that lay beneath his calm, calculated exterior. But then, in a move as swift as it was unexpected, he reached into a drawer of his desk and pulled out a manila folder. "I'll tell you what's going to happen," he said, his voice suddenly cold and firm. "You've made a lot of noise, Maya. You've stirred up a lot of trouble. But in the end, that's all you've done. Noise. And I'm done with it." He opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers. Maya's heart sank when she saw the official-looking documents in front of her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. "It's a legal document," Price said, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've made a lot of wild claims, Maya, and now I'm going to make sure they cost you. Defamation, slander, you name it. I have the best legal team money can buy. They'll crush you." Maya's stomach turned. This was what she had feared, the power he held, the sheer weight of his influence. She had known he would fight back, but seeing it so clearly laid out in front of her made the reality hit harder than she anticipated. She had exposed him, but now she was staring down the barrel of the consequences. But then something shifted inside her. The years of silence, of being afraid to speak up, of letting powerful people like him control her life, it all clicked into place. She wasn't going to back down now. Not after everything she had gone through, not after everything she had learned. Maya took a deep breath, standing straighter. "You can try to bury me with your lawyers and your money, Charles. You can try to intimidate me all you want, but it won't work, because the truth is already out there. People are waking up. They're seeing you for who you really are, and they're not going to forget." Charles Price's smile faltered, just for a moment, before he regained his composure. "We'll see about that," he said, his tone now full of barely contained anger. "But make no mistake, Maya, you've made a powerful enemy." Maya didn't flinch. "I'll take that risk." She turned and walked out of the office, her head held high. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew one thing for certain. This fight wasn't over. Maya stood outside the courthouse, her fingers trembling as she gripped the strap of her purse. The sun was setting behind her, casting long shadows across the steps. It had been a long, grueling few months since she confronted Charles Price, but today she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. The weight of everything that had happened, the media storm, the threats, the isolation, had been crushing. But now there was a glimmer of hope. The legal battle had begun, and things were moving faster than she had expected. With the evidence she had, the pressure from press, and the growing public outcry, Charles Price's empire was beginning to show cracks. But standing on these steps, facing the courthouse, Maya knew the real fight was just beginning. Today wasn't about her. It was about something far bigger, the idea that someone, anyone, could be held accountable for years of abuse. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was part of something that could change everything. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, finding a message from Tamara. "Tamara, we're all watching. This is your moment. Don't back down." Maya smiled faintly. This is my moment, she thought. As she walked into the courthouse, the echo of her steps sounded louder than they ever had before. The hallway was bustling with people, lawyers, reporters, onlookers, but Maya wasn't intimidated. She had nothing to hide. She wasn't afraid of them anymore. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Charles Price sat at the front, his usual smug expression absent. Today, his demeanor was different, hollow, strained. His legal team was busy whispering among themselves, likely formulating their next move. Maya's eyes locked with his for a brief moment. He didn't smile. He didn't sneer. He just stared at her, almost as if he didn't know what to do now that the tables had finally turned. The trial was about to begin. Maya had never imagined she'd be here, sitting in a courtroom, surrounded by lawyers and reporters, fighting against a man who had made her life miserable. But now, everything she had fought for felt so much bigger than her. It wasn't just about Charles Price. It was about all the people who had been silenced, the workers who had been exploited, the marginalized voices that had been crushed under the weight of corporate greed. She wasn't just seeking justice for herself. She was fighting for the ones who couldn't speak, the ones who had never been given a platform. Her lawyer, Maria, sat beside her, flipping to the file of evidence. Maya had met Maria a few weeks after the public fallout. Maria had been willing to take her case on, knowing it would be a difficult one. She was a seasoned lawyer, well known for taking on corporations, but even she had hesitated at the magnitude of what they were facing. Still, she had fought alongside Maya every step of the way. "You're ready?" Maria said, her voice low, calm. "Just remember, we've got the truth on our side. He can't lie his way out of this." Maya nodded, trying to steady the rapid beat of her heart. She had already been through so much, but this was a moment that would define everything. The judge entered the room, and the proceedings began. Charles Price's lawyers were quick to make their case. They painted him as a misunderstood visionary, a man who had built his empire from the ground up and who had no intention of discriminating against anyone. They claimed that the allegations were exaggerated and that any hiring practices that had taken place were merely coincidental, not malicious. Maya could feel the tension in the air, and she knew this would be a long battle. But as the hours passed, something began to shift. More and more evidence came to light. Emails, memos, even video footage that showed how Charles Price had systematically discriminated against people of color within his company. There was no denying the truth anymore. Maya's case was airtight. As the prosecution called Maya to the stand, she stood, her heart racing. The room felt distant for a moment, like everything around her was muffled, except for the voices of the lawyers and the low hum of anticipation. When she stepped up to the witness stand, she could feel every eye in the room on her, waiting for her testimony. She took a deep breath and started to speak. "I've worked in service my whole life," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at her. "And for years, I learned to keep my head down, to accept the way things were. But then I worked at La Maison Luxe, and I saw something that shook me. I saw how people were treated, people like me, how their opportunities were limited, how they were never given a chance to grow. And I saw the man who ran it all, Charles Price. He's the face of a system that doesn't care about people, a system that profits off of fear and silence." Her words rang out, clear and unwavering. She could see the reactions in the courtroom, the reporters scribbling furiously in their notebooks, the stunned expressions of some of the jurors. But she didn't care. This was the truth, and she wasn't going to back down. She went on, recounting the details of her encounter with Price in the restaurant, the bow he had made to her, the feeling of degradation and humiliation. She spoke about the internal culture at Apex Technologies, the way workers had been treated, how Price had created an environment of fear. She laid out everything she had learned, every piece of evidence she had uncovered. When she finished, she looked at Charles Price, who was staring at her from across the room. For the first time, she didn't feel the familiar pang of fear. Instead, she felt a sense of empowerment, because she knew the truth was on her side. It wasn't just about one man. It was about an entire system, one that was starting to crack under the pressure of people like Maya, people who refused to stay silent. The trial lasted for several more weeks, but as each day passed, the case against Price grew stronger. And finally, after weeks of tense arguments, the verdict was delivered. Charles Price was found guilty of racial discrimination, exploitation, and wrongful termination. His empire, once untouchable, began to fall apart. The public backlash was fierce, and several of his top investors withdrew their support. His company faced a series of lawsuits from former employees, and public opinion turned sharply against him. But Maya knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The fight for justice came at a heavy cost. She had lost her job, her reputation had been tarnished, and she had been pushed to the brink. Still, as she walked out the courthouse, the weight on her shoulders felt just a little bit lighter. She had fought for what was right, and she had won. As the media captured the moment, Maya couldn't help but smile. Not because she had beaten Charles Price, but because she had proven that even the most powerful people could be held accountable. The battle wasn't over, but it was a start. The day after the verdict, Maya found herself standing on a rooftop overlooking the city. The skyline bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. It felt surreal, almost impossible that the fight she had waged, the one that consumed her for months, had actually resulted in victory. Charles Price, the billionaire mogul who had once looked down on her with such disdain, was now facing the consequences of his actions. His empire was crumbling, and Maya had played a pivotal role in its downfall. But as she looked out over the horizon, a quiet sense of emptiness lingered beneath the triumph. She had won, yes, but at what cost? The weight of everything that had transpired, the late nights, the fear, the personal sacrifices, was only now beginning to hit her. The pain of the journey, the emotional toll of fighting a battle, so deeply entrenched in power and privilege, wasn't something she could just shake off. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, interrupting her thoughts. She pulled out, seeing a message from Tamara. Tamara, we did it, girl. Price is out, and the media is all over it. You've changed the game. Maya smiled softly, her thumb hovering over the screen. I don't feel like I changed anything, she thought, but she knew better than to ignore the victory. They had done it. But as she tapped out a response, the reality of the situation settled back in. She had done it, not just as a symbol, but as a real person, someone who had been pushed to her limit and forced to confront the darkest corners of power and privilege. Her life would never be the same, but in a way, that was a relief. She didn't want to go back to the way things were, to the quiet resignation that had kept her from speaking out for so long. I couldn't have done it without you, Tam. You were there from the start. The phone buzzed again. We're just getting started. I know you feel it too. This is a first step. You've got a lot more to say, and the world is listening. Maya looked down at her phone, feeling a bittersweet lump rise in her throat. The truth was, she wasn't sure where to go from here. After everything that had happened, what came next? Could she just go back to her life? She glanced around at the city before her. The sun was setting, casting long shadows and hues of orange and purple across the streets. It was beautiful, but in some ways it felt out of reach, like a dream she hadn't fully woken up from. She had stood in the dark for so long that she wasn't sure how to step into the light. Her phone rang, interrupting her again. This time, it was Maria, her lawyer. Maya answered with a deep breath. Maya. Maria's voice was warm, but it held an edge of finality. I know you're processing everything right now, but I wanted to let you know that we've reached a settlement with Apex. We got a substantial payout for you and the others who have been wronged. Maya paused, feeling a slight chill run through her. A settlement? Yeah, Maria continued. It's a hefty sum, but more importantly, it's going to provide you with the resources you need to continue the fight. We've included provisions to ensure that people who work for Apex will be able to pursue their own claims. This could lead to bigger changes across the industry. Maya's heart raced, but she remained silent for a moment. She hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated the financial component. It felt strange, like a reward for the battle she had fought, but there was no satisfaction in it, not the kind she had hoped for. I don't know what to do with it, she said, her voice distant. It doesn't feel right. I understand, Maria said gently. But remember, Maya, this isn't just about the money. This is about making sure the story doesn't end with you. This is about making sure what happened to you doesn't keep happening to others. Your victory is part of a bigger shift. That's what matters. Maya nodded, even though Maria couldn't see her. She knew she was right. The money, the settlement, those were tools, instruments to help make the change real. But still, it didn't feel like it could erase the damage that had already been done. She ended the call and stood for a long while, staring out at the city. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate what she had accomplished. She had exposed the truth. She had fought back, and now the world would never be the same. But there was a hollow space inside her, a space that had been carved out by years of systemic oppression, of being silenced, of being nothing more than a footnote in someone else's story. Winning was important, yes, but she didn't know how to reconcile that with the part of her that felt like she had lost something in the process. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to see Tamara walking toward her. Her face lit up with a smile that could light up a room. "You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," Tamara said, her voice light. But Maya could hear the concern behind it. Maya smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I have been," she admitted, "but I'm getting used to it." Tamara stood next to her, gazing out at the city with her. "You're stronger than you think. This isn't the end, Maya. It's just the beginning. You've got a platform now. You've got a voice. People are listening." Maya nodded slowly. "I just don't know what to do with it yet." "You will," Tamara said firmly. "You'll figure it out, one step at a time." Maya glanced at her, feeling a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It wasn't clear yet, and it wasn't perfect, but it was there. The journey she had started was far from over. There was still so much work to be done. But now, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The sun had set, leaving the city bathed in twilight. And as they stood there together, Maya realized that maybe, just maybe, she was ready for whatever came next. Months had passed since Charles Price's downfall, and in the quiet moments, Maya still found herself questioning everything. The world had changed in ways she never expected, but the scars of the battle were still there. Her life had been upended by her own decision, by the world she had tried so hard to navigate and change, but there was no going back. She had no intention of going back. Maya now found herself walking down a new path, one where the choices were hers to make, not anyone else's. She had spent so many years surviving, accepting the crumbs given to her by systems that never valued her, that she had forgotten how to truly dream, to picture a future outside of the limits placed on her. But now, with her past behind her and a future of her own design ahead of her, the possibilities seemed endless. She had used the settlement funds to create something of her own, an organization dedicated to empowering marginalized voices in the workforce, to exposing the systemic racism that continued to plague industries across the country. It wasn't a large foundation, not yet, but it was hers. Maya had built it from the ground up, with the help of Tamara and a few key allies she had met during the trial. Together, they were working to change the landscape, to make sure no one else had to face the same challenges she had endured. But the road was far from smooth. There were still days when the weight of what she had done settled over her like a heavy fog. The emotional toll of everything she had been through, the public scrutiny, the legal battles, the personal attacks, was still very real. And the trauma of having been subjected to years of microaggressions, overt racism, and powerlessness didn't simply disappear because she had won. There were still nights when she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if the sacrifices had been worth it, if her work had really made a difference, if anything had changed. But then, there were moments like today when Maya stood in front of a room full of young professionals, people of color like her, who were eager to learn, to grow, and to fight for their place in the world. She was giving a lecture on diversity in the workplace and what systemic change actually looked like. Standing there in front of that crowd, Maya felt something shift inside her. There was a quiet power in being able to speak with authority about the struggles she had overcome, not as a victim, but as a force for change. She ended her lecture with a question that had become her rallying cry. "What will you do with your voice?" The room erupted into applause, and Maya couldn't help but smile. She wasn't the same person who had been humiliated in that restaurant, or the one who had cowered in fear during the long months of litigation. She was a different woman now, someone who had taken the broken pieces of her life and rebuilt them into something stronger. After the lecture, Maya met with a few of the attendees. A young woman named Aisha approached her, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," Aisha said, her voice filled with emotion. "Your story, it gives me hope. I've been so afraid to speak up, to even think about fighting back. But hearing you, it makes me think maybe I can do it too." Maya felt her chest tighten. This was why she had fought, why she had put herself through the fire, to make sure others knew they didn't have to remain silent, that they could change the world too. "You can," Maya said, her voice firm with conviction. "You don't need permission to speak your truth. Your voice is just as important as anyone else's. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Later that evening, As Maya walked out of the building and into the crisp night air, she felt a surge of purpose. It wasn't the first time she had felt this way, but each time was different. Each time, it felt more real, more permanent. The work was far from over, but it was in moments like these, moments when she could see the ripple effect of her efforts, that Maya knew she was on the right path. She wasn't just advocating for herself anymore. She was advocating for all the voices that had been drowned out, for the people who had been silenced by a system designed to keep them invisible. Maya's phone buzzed again. It was a text from Tamara. Tamara, you're changing lives. Just wanted you to know that. Proud of you. Maya smiled, her heart warming at the words. She didn't have to do this alone. She had never been alone. Tamara had stood by her through every step. And now, they were both part of something bigger than they ever could have imagined. I couldn't have done it without you, Maya replied. She slipped her phone back into her pocket and took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs. It was a new beginning, yes, but it wasn't just hers. It was theirs. All the people who had stood with her, fought alongside her, and believed in the possibility of change. As she made her way home, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because the world had suddenly become perfect, but because she knew she had done her part. She had fought for justice, and though the road had been long, she had never let go of the belief that it was worth it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to face. But for tonight, she allowed herself to rest. She had earned it, and as the city lights twinkled below her, Maya knew that this was only the beginning.